So to determine the right feeding size for what you're going to feed your snakes, a good rule of thumb is to look at the thickest part of the snake, and that you don't want to go too much more than that, but something about the same width as the snake is going to be a good size feeder for your snake. Another good rule to know is the 10 to 20% rule, and that's if you have a scale that can measure in grams preferably. You can just weigh your snake, and anything from 10 to 20% their body weight is going to be also a good size for them. But something to keep in mind with that is that when they get older, like this rule of thumb and the one where you choose the same as their body width, those are two good rules of thumbs, but the problem is once they get bigger, they don't really apply anymore. So, for instance, when you have like a big or an adult male like this pewter here, you're not going to feed him something that's as thick as him. That would be pretty ridiculous. That could contribute to obesity and health problems actually. So once they get over 1,000 grams, you don't want to really feed them anything bigger than a 50 to 80 gram small rat. Maybe if it was a very big female, you might feed her a little bit bigger than that, but I wouldn't really go past like a 100-gram rat for anything. So that's just something to keep in mind. As you noticed before, I've been talking about only rats for feeder items. I haven't mentioned mice at all. And that's because mice are really inferior when it comes to a food choice for ball pythons, because the truth is that they're going to outgrow them really quickly. I mean, within 3-4 months, mice are going to be way too small for the ball python. So, but if you go with rats, they're going to be a good choice for their whole life. Uh, like I said, this is a rat pup. So this is going to be good for smaller size. This is a weaned, this kind of the intermediate size, and then these are smalls, rat smalls, which is what I mentioned is fine for like an adult male for the rest of his life. They're never going to go any bigger than these. For a female, you may want to step up one more size to maybe bit bigger smalls or maybe even a medium, but even if you just go with smalls for the rest of their life, it's perfectly fine. A lot of people feed way too big food items, and they really don't need them. So once you pull your rats out of the freezer, you can just put them someplace warm to unthaw. I just use a empty drawer in my rack where the heat tape is, and it gets them nice and warm. And then what you're going to want to do is use a blow dryer, just a regular blow dryer, or something that blows hot air, like a space heater or something, and just warm them up a little bit, especially the head, because ball pythons see with heat receptors, heat pits. So if that animal's not warm, they may not take it, especially if they're a pickier one. So you're going to want to warm them up, and then hopefully they're going to take it. And then you're always going to want to use a pair of tongs like these just to make sure that you don't accidentally get bit. Almost always eats, so there she goes. And unfortunately, not all of them will take them as easily as he just did. So, fortunately, a lot of ball pythons will eat just fine. They will have no problem taking frozen thawed or any kind of food. But the problem is that a lot of time ball pythons can be picky. A lot of times they'll just go off food, seemingly randomly during the winter. Sometimes when they're feeling like they want to breed. Sometimes they just will go off food for no apparent reason. So that's another thing about ball pythons that you're going to need to know when you're getting one. If you're going to be stressed out when, the snake's not eating, it may not be a good choice for you, because ball pythons will just randomly go off food. One week they'll be eating, next week they won't. and it's perfectly normal. There's nothing to be worried about. As long as the snake isn't losing a ton of weight, they'll be just fine. I've heard stories where the snakes haven't eaten for months, even years, like 1 or 2 years, and they're fine. Now, a smaller snake, a baby, can't go very long without food. Maybe a month or 2 months, and that's it. And then you may have to resort to more drastic measures. But for a subadult or anything that's a decent size, there's not much to worry about when they go off food. Another thing I wanted to talk about here was live feeding. It's a bit of a controversial topic, and a lot of people post videos on YouTube that people say are cruel and stuff, and a lot of people do abuse the fact that you may have to feed them live. But the fact of the matter is that ball pythons are quite picky, as we talked about before, or they can be at least. So if you do have a ball python like this guy here who just won't eat, and they're small, and they're not going to be able to survive if they don't eat in any other way, it's perfectly acceptable to try feeding them live, because if it comes to either your snake or the mouse is going to live, I'd pick the snake every time. So it's just something to consider, that if you're going to own a ball python, you may have to feed them live. So if you're against that, you may want to get, a corn snake or something, a king snake or something like that, that's always going to eat frozen thawed. Now, all my snakes here do eat frozen thawed, so 90% of the time they will, but you have to be prepared that, for that 10% that just won't eat frozen thawed for the life of them. So it does happen with ball pythons. In addition to them not eating all the time, sometimes you have live feeders, sometimes you have mouse feeders that won't eat anything but mice. So that's also a bad situation, because, since mice, as we talked about before, are too small for them, you're going to have to end up feeding them 5 or 6 mice a week, and that can get expensive. So you want to get them switched over to rats, as, if it's possible, if at all possible, and over to frozen thawed if at all possible. So one problem that I see most often, one of the most commonly occurring problems for a lot of ball python keepers, is shedding issues. So I'm pretty sure you already know this, but reptiles and especially snakes will actually shed, and the shed should be in one piece. So this includes their eye caps, everything. So there's actually scales all over their entire body. So the problem with this is, if the humidity is not right, then you can have what's called a stuck shed, and they will actually be unable to remove the shed from themselves, because it'll stick on because it's not moist enough to come off. So I've seen this with tons and tons of ball pythons that are for sale on Craigslist. It's really quite sad, because especially their eye caps, if they get stuck and they can't shed them off, they will actually become blind. And on the rest of their body, if it does not come off in time and they continue to grow, it restricts growth, and it can actually choke them, or damage their internals. So that's a very important consideration. You want to have proper humidity. So if you have a tank, you want to have it mostly covered on the top. If you have a screen, you can cover with saran wrap, or make something custom. If you have a tub, there's not really much to worry about. It's covered, so you should be just fine. I mean, to be totally honest, with these with tubs that I've been using, I've never had a single problem with a stuck shed. So if you have the right humidity, it's nothing to worry about. And if you do have a stuck shed, if you didn't know about this before, or if you just bought the snake from someone that didn't know what they were doing, you can always soak the snake to get rid of it. If it's not too bad, you just put them in a warm water bath, not deep, just like half their body high, so you don't want them swimming in it. And you just stick them in there for about an hour, and it should come off. So If not, there's other ways you can look up on the internet, but you really shouldn't be having this problem if you have the right humidity. You guys can see this is what your snake shed should look like after it's done with it. As you can see, it even has the eye caps on there, so that's what you want to do. Every time when they shed, you want to check the shed after to make sure that the eye caps are on the shed and not on the snake.